Every year, Startup Grind hosts our SG Women Leaders Month, proudly recognizing the accomplishments of successful women leaders all over the world. These women are founders, venture capitalists, engineers, executives, educators, and more who represent our community all around the world. This month's SG Women Month is proudly presented by Google for Startups and Silicon Valley Bank.
So yes, hello and thank you everyone for joining us for this event with Startup Grind Grand Rapids. Startup Grind, just a little review for those of you who aren't too familiar with what we're doing. We are the world's largest network of startup entrepreneurs with 2 million plus entrepreneurs across 600 chapters in over 125 countries. Now every year, Startup Grind hosts our SG Women Month, and we proudly recognize the accomplishments of successful women all over the world. Now, as a global organization dedicated to helping break down barriers to access to entrepreneurship, we're especially sensitive to the issues of gender equity as we help build ecosystems across the globe. Just yesterday, I held an event and I was interviewing Celestine Ukperi, which is the director of a chapter for Startup Grind right outside Nairobi, Kenya. And she was speaking to me about a public program in response to COVID-19 that is funding women entrepreneurs and women-owned small businesses, specifically to proactively address the fact that women are disproportionately affected by the economic effects of the pandemic. That's a very interesting conversation, and if you're interested in checking that out, it's a fairly short one. The recording is on our chapter page, and you can always reach out to me and I can give you the link. The event tonight is about female leadership and entrepreneurship in Michigan. Startup Grind Global is very interested in what's happening in the ecosystem globally, also regionally, and specifically with the Midwest, because we're kind of like a darling, you know, we're the last great kept secret. And our pivot has been from in-person local events to 100% virtual like everyone else, and to work to connect ecosystems in ways that they've never been before. With that, we are really proud to host 6 women leaders who are all stakeholders in Michigan's entrepreneurial and startup ecosystem. And I'm truly grateful for the generosity of time that these women have given us. And if I could, I'd love to get a virtual round of applause, if we can do that. I don't know, it looks like just the panelists are alive, but that's all right.
I know, we're like, yay, ourselves.
Oh, look at that, Diane got us, yeah. I love the virtual applause. So I'd like to start by going around and getting some introductions, who are you, and maybe your role in organization. And we can start with Terry.
Oh. Hi, I'm Terry Barclay. I'm president and CEO of Inforum, which is the largest network for professional women in Michigan with between 5,000 and 6,000 members. And we have offices in Detroit and Grand Rapids. We also are very involved because we have a program called Engage that is aimed at high growth women-led ventures. But we have been in existence as an organization since 1962. And you can imagine that over the course of that history, mind you, I was not here for the entire time. You know, the organization has remained true to its mission, which is about accelerating women's careers, supporting them in pursuing their passions and their dreams, however they choose to do so. How we've gone about doing that has changed dramatically over the decades. So one of the things that maybe later when we're talking about data, I know Emily has great fresh information that she's published. And one of the things I can fill everyone in on is the Michigan Women's Leadership Report, which is original data for Michigan. We've been publishing since 2003.
Yes.
Glad to be here.
Thank you very much. And you and I spoke a little bit earlier today, and one of the things that we touched on was talent pipeline being an issue. So that's with talent, I'm excited to have Anne here. So Anne.
Hi, thanks for having me as part of this wonderful esteemed panel. My name is Anne Pentiak, and I am currently with West Michigan Works. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that organization, it's your local workforce development board. So we help employers, individuals looking for work, changing careers, starting their businesses. And I'm part of a team that specifically works with businesses in West Michigan. And we cover a 7-county region, so from Muskegon all the way down to Allegan, all the way over to Barry, Ionia, Montcalm, Kent. So we cover a large area with reps all over. And really what we try to do is gauge employer demand, figure out what's going on with employment and talent trends, and see how we can, use our resources to support businesses in West Michigan. Part of my work is convening a council of tech employers and economic development partners and education providers in our region to really address some of those long-term talent needs. So how do we grow tech talent? How do we, inspire the next generation to pursue careers, not just in technology, but careers that are right here in West Michigan, right there in their backyard. So it's a joy working with these employers. We have great industry here in West Michigan. So I'm here representing workforce development.
So glad to have you, and thank you very much. And we'll stay in West Michigan here with the introductions. Laurie was one of the first people that I was able to meet as I was doing my Startup Grind Roadshow early this year. So Laurie, hello.
Hi, I'm Laurie Supinski, and I'm a program director at Start Garden. We're located in Grand Rapids, and we've got a co-working space. So we're membership driven to that degree, but we also do ecosystem building in the community. We work with all entrepreneurs from every phase of entrepreneurship, whether it's just idea stage or growth stage. Start Garden's been in existence since 2012. Started out with a focus probably more heavily on high tech, high growth companies. But about 4.5 years ago, it became an organization that pivoted a little bit. We became a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and are really focusing on all types of entrepreneurs. So that's not to say that we don't still focus on high tech, high growth, but we also are focusing on lifestyle businesses as well. My role as program director, we don't do a lot of technical assistance, but we work really collaboratively with a lot of organizations that do work with, building your business plan, marketing plans, different things like that. But we the two programs that we primarily run are 5x5 Night, which is a monthly pitch competition that is the goal is to get early stage capital to entrepreneurs. And then 2 years ago, we launched something called the Start Garden 100, which again is another platform that we use to get capital into the hands of entrepreneurs. I think we've identified the early stage capital piece as one of the most important, and especially for women entrepreneurs is maybe one of the hardest places to be at when you are looking to start a business and you're not going to go to a bank and get a loan. Where do you go? So that's been a lot of our area of focus. So.
Awesome. And would you be comfortable sharing your other entrepreneurial venture?
Oh, okay. Yes, I can share my personal entrepreneurial venture. My husband and I are not originally from this area. We both moved here. We both grew up in New York State, lived in Washington, D.C., and he was in the hotel business. We landed here for him to have a hotel job in Grand Rapids. But for the last 25 years, we live in Newaygo, Michigan. He pivoted from the hotel business and is a full-time fly fishing guide, author, and then we run a bed and breakfast on the Muskegon River. So we've been actually doing that for 25 years, which I find incredibly hard to believe.
Time flies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really exciting. And what your husband be doing with his pivot through COVID, I'm excited to keep track of that.
Yeah.
So let's move north and talk to Jennifer, get an introduction from her.
Well, hello, and thanks for having me, Corey. I feel
Did you guys
so.
lose me?
No, we can still hear you. I feel so fortunate to be on this panel with all these incredible women. And I'm the executive director with TC New Tech. And I came on board in late January. TC New Tech puts on an event every month where 4 or 5 startups will pitch their ideas and their business. And similar to Laurie and Star Garden, we have businesses pitching at a variety of different levels. Some are brand new startups, some are emerging businesses looking for their next round of funding. And we also twice a year do something called bar napkin pitch, where it's people are just throwing out their very raw ideas. They're looking for funding usually, but they're also looking for programmers or people that want to partner with them. So we do this once a month, 12 times a year. 4 or 5 new businesses are pitching their ideas. And in our audience are other entrepreneurs. There's a lot of people interested in technology, and we have angel investors. We have people looking to invest in small businesses. And June is the beginning of our 6th year. So 5 years ago, we launched this company. And the whole idea behind it was initially to locate where all the techies were hanging out in Traverse City and get them together. And it progressed very quickly into this idea of the startups that needed not just connection to programmers and tech people, but also needed a connection to investors. And we've got a really great group of investors in the audience. I came from a real varied background, working for entrepreneurs, starting businesses myself. My husband and I own a business together, and I've also pitched some kind of crazy ideas that haven't gotten off the ground at TC New Tech before I came to work for them. So now, as the executive director, my first month, we had a physical event at the City Opera House downtown, a couple hundred people, and it went really well. So then the next month we started into a pandemic. So we quickly also had to learn all kinds of new technology, and we've had great exposure. We've had great attendance and engagement from our audience. We've definitely grown our audience because we're bringing in viewers from way outside of just those that would show up at our local event. And we're still trying to figure out what the future is going to bring. If we are, we'll continue with the virtual, which has been successful, and maybe a hybrid where we're hearing our pitches might be more virtual, but our audience could be both virtual and in person. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I had to switch to cell. I lost my internet connection, so thanks for proceeding without me. And then maybe we can move over to Amanda.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda Lewan. I'm a founder, CEO of Bamboo Detroit. I'm also a Forum alum of several programs. So I know Terry and Emily, and I'm so excited to meet Anne and Jennifer and everyone else on this call today. But I'm an entrepreneur myself, sort of stumbled into it. We do co-working spaces and a lot of community programming. So we're a good resource to connect you into the Detroit ecosystem, soon also Royal Oak. And love building community, helping founders. Uniquely, we try to be very accessible for entrepreneurship. So we have almost 60% of our members are women-owned or women with equity in a company. And so super excited for this conversation. and to hear how we all are going to help move Michigan forward coming out of COVID.
Awesome. And then that leads us to Emily, right?
Yay!
Yay.
Hello, it's me, Emily. I'm Emily Heintz. I am the founder and managing director of Entry Point. We're a research organization, but not the lame kind, like the cool kind. So we do a lot of research on entrepreneurial ecosystems across the Midwest, both the tech side and the Main Street business side. And we're doing a lot of research on how COVID-19's impacted local businesses in the Midwest. And so that's been really depressing, but there's been like some cool silver linings with that. We also help deliver the research insights to organizations we partner with to either implement programs to promote entrepreneurship and to support small businesses and startups, or help them improve existing programs that they're running. Yeah, so we do one of the reports that we do that a lot of people are familiar with is the annual research report for the Michigan Venture Capital Association. So we've been doing that since 2013. And that's a comprehensive analysis of the venture capital activity and startup activity in Michigan. And yeah, so I'm like super excited for today. There's like so many of you that I've been like, oh, I've been seeing your name everywhere. And I was like, oh, I'm going to talk to that person later. Jennifer is like, you should be scared a little.
Yeah, one of the things I was pretty excited about was in my talking with each one of you to get prepared for today, I did realize that some of you haven't really had the opportunity to connect with one another before. And then in my conversation with Terry today, we spoke a little bit about how this 100% virtual lifestyle now has given us the benefit of not needing to have that mindset of, oh, well, if I can't drive down Arbor, I'm never going to see Amanda. So now we have this really great opportunity to reach across regions, which is really awesome. So thank you so much for all the introductions. I think that's everybody, right? I didn't miss anyone, did I? No? Okay, because I'm a little distracted.
What about
over here.
Anne? Did you introduce Anne?
Yep.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay.
So yeah, I'd like to start with maybe Terry and Emily and get us started with some of these facts and stats of maybe the hard numbers of kind of maybe where we're at with the entrepreneurship here, and then also through that lens of women in Michigan. And so I'll just let you guys take it away. How about that?
Sure. Well, so why don't I start, Emily? But I think you need to be the centerpiece here. Just to frame it, we've been doing research just on women's presence in leadership, and this is in large companies. This is not in startups, although some of them are kind of small. But I think the key thing is that we've been doing it consistently since 2003, and so we have really good trend data. It's called the Michigan Women's Leadership Report. If anybody's interested, of course, it's on our website, informmichigan.org. But the bottom line is we've been looking at women's presence in leadership roles in those companies. And while there have been some incremental gains, really primarily for white women, to be perfectly honest, because we also slice the data according to race, and it seems very important to mention that, women are roughly, just to give you a level set, women are 21% of the directors of companies. It would be interesting to see how that compares to directors of startups, those that have boards of that kind. And are roughly 12%, well, not roughly, are 12% of named executive officers and 19% of all executive officers. Named executive officers, for those of you who follow the SEC proxy filings and 10Ks, are the top 5 most highly compensated officers at companies. And those numbers have moved really, I don't know, a couple percentage points since 2003. And this is at a time when women are 60% of college graduates and have been fully half of the workforce for quite some time. And then I think what's important to note is that the numbers for women of color are just horrible. They are stuck at 2% of directors and 2% of executive officers since '03. They really haven't moved much at all. And so, you know, what we've been working on, the reason behind doing this research is just to make sure, you know, the theory being if you have data, our report actually has become a benchmarking tool. It's become a benchmarking tool not only for these companies, but also for the institutional investors that buy their stock. And that has been interesting to watch. In fact, I'll share one quick little story. The first year or second year, I can't remember, that we published this, I got a call from one of my board members who was an officer at one of the companies that was in the research report. And her CEO had called her into the office because he knew that she was on our board. And he had fielded a call earlier that day from the UAW VIBA, which has 70 billion under investment. I mean, it's huge how much money they have. And they basically said, you don't have any women on your board, so we're going to think twice about whether we invest in your company. And so the reason why I think it's important to mention this really at all within a startup context is fast forward to the World Economic Forum this year in 2020, and you have Goldman Sachs announcing that they are not going to lead the IPOs for any startup companies that do not have women on their boards. And so I think that the overall concern about the business case and the importance of inclusion and diversity, certainly from a gender perspective, but all perspectives, remains there for large companies and for startups, that it is about diversity of thought. It is about being close to your customer, making sure you have multiple voices at the table. There have been multiple research studies which show, for example, EY and the Peterson Institute tried to quantify what is the economic advantage. What do we see in the economic performance, the bottom line, if you will, between companies that have diversity in their leadership ranks and companies that don't. And they found it translated into a 6% boost to the bottom line, having diversity involved on the board and in leadership roles. And I just think that's interesting, because if I walked into any CEO's office anywhere and said, what do you think about a 6% increase in your bottom line? I think, you know, you'd have probably pretty much everybody's attention. So I think it's why it's important that we keep talking about this topic. But Emily, you've got data from the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's like, I feel like everything you said is really reflected in a lot of the data that we pull every year. So I think like when you look at the national picture, we do see that the tech community has a significantly larger problem with diversity than Main Street businesses do. So a lot of the research that we do with like small businesses and retail businesses or restaurants, or we tend to see a lot more of like an even distribution between men and women business owners. But in the tech community in Michigan specifically, there's 144 venture-backed companies in Michigan, and only 10% of those are led by a female CEO. A lot of times in the research that we do, I focus a lot on the CEO specifically, because I feel like a lot of people, it's interesting whenever I say like CEO or founder, people will like find a founder from like out of the woodwork to be like, yep, the founder was a woman, or the founder was a racial minority. And then I'll be like, oh, really? Like, are they the CEO? No, this white guy's the CEO, but like, they're there. And I'll be like, well, are they involved in the day-to-day? No, they founded the company and then we took over like 2 months later, but like still. And so a lot of times we focus really on like the actual person in power and like the decision-making person within the organization, who's generally like the CEO. So, and so if you compare that to Fortune 500 companies, which is what you had kind of touched on, 7.2% of Fortune 500 companies have female CEOs. So we are like a tiny bit ahead of Fortune 500 companies, but that's really, really not like anything to brag about. And it's interesting too, because in Michigan, so we've seen kind of like a very small uptick, even in the last, if you look at the last 6 years, there's been 36% increase in the number of female-led venture-backed startups, and then 7% increase from like over last year. It's funny, it keeps telling me that I'm the host, so pretty soon I'm just gonna like seize the day and take over. I'm gonna be like, yay. But yeah, so it's interesting though to me, because the amount of capital raised by women in within Michigan, the amount of venture capital has been like pretty staggering. But then you tend to see that the CEO, when the CEO is a woman and they raise a ton of capital, the next year they're replaced by a man. So it's kind of interesting. So like women in the last 5 years, they've raised, just in the last 5 years, 553% increase in the amount of venture capital raised. It dipped from last year, but the amount of capital, like when you look at the like largest rounds raised every year, which we do publish, so many of them are led by, if you think Mina Such, you think—
I was going to say, if you take Mina Such out of those numbers, what do they look like? You know, like if you take the outliers out.
Still very similar though between, so Mina and then, Jen Baird, you like, but then it's like, we take them out of the numbers after they become no longer the CEO. So like Mina with, oh my gosh, I'm so blanking, Pronai, had raised a record-breaking round at the time out of anybody that she had raised like the most. And then we saw that she had, kind of stepped back from the company after that year and is now doing, has another startup, and they're raising, significant amount of money. So she's definitely got that skill set. But it is just kind of interesting to see like the trend like every single time, and you would think that sometimes yes and sometimes no, and certainly there are like fundraisers, like this CEO is the fundraiser and this CEO is the person who's going to be like, startup 2.0. And so I don't think that's completely unique, but it's definitely kind of interesting trend that we see more with women-led businesses than male-led businesses. On the small business side, those businesses tend not to be the kind that are like, oh, we need to scale and we need to like grow big and hire tons of people. They're kind of like, we are happy at 10 employees and we're going to continue operating our business until we retire and then we sell the business kind of thing. And so in those types of businesses, we do tend to see a lot more women in leadership roles within the small business community, at least. But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what you guys, we might have a 3-year-old who's a panelist in a second here. You just open up the window, like open up the door like, hello, I'm here. And I'm like, oh God, get away. Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what you guys see like in your local community.
Does anyone have any like local anecdotes or reflections or responses to the information from Terry and Emily? Or
no, I don't have from the Traverse City area. 5 years ago, we were primarily focused on startups and technology, and over the last 5 years, we've broadened who is pitching to our audience and ventured into other sectors. They initially, there were not many women that pitched, and that has it's definitely changing. The women in technology in our area is definitely changing, and just the whole ecosystem of technology-based businesses is really growing in this area. So it's improving, but we definitely still have a lot of room for growth up here. We do, you know, I know on our board alone, we have almost 50% of our board members are female. And in Traverse City and the greater Northwestern Michigan region here, we have more and more women showing up in high-level positions. So we've definitely got a toehold, and things are changing up here as well.
I mean, I would say, kind of to echo Jennifer a little bit, you know, Start Garden started out years ago as focusing on high tech, high growth. But back in 2012 and 2013, that was primarily white males. And so in the last 4.5 years that we've kind of pivoted our focus a little bit and started focusing on startups across the spectrum, we definitely see you know, a lot more women pitching, but then there's a lot more businesses that were being pitched. You know, it's a lot of lifestyle and service and, you know, products, food, you know, all across the board, which is great. And we totally are happy to see that. And that's kind of happened organically. It's not, you know, through our 5x5 night monthly programs and our Start Garden 100, you know, we see the submissions coming in pretty equally between men and women. But when it comes to tech, clearly there's still some work to be done with finding women in tech and minorities in tech. So we are definitely focused on trying to find those founders and find and be intentional about supporting that sector. So, and you know, we operate the Smart Zone in Grand Rapids, so we are looking, you know, to focus on tech companies through the Smart Zone. So,
would you be able to quickly just describe what the Smart Zone is for those who are listening in and don't really understand what kind of opportunity that is for areas?
Yeah, not a quick explanation. I mean, the Smart Zone, and please, anybody else jump in, because I'm by no means an expert, but Smart Zones are designated areas within the state of Michigan that is funded through the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And the idea is that it is to focus on supporting and recruiting tech businesses into those specific physical locations. And so the money comes from tax capture. So within that designated zone, for instance, in Grand Rapids, there's literally a physical boundary line that includes different places. And a certain portion of taxes that come in are then to be used for the purpose of supporting tech companies. So there's a board, a local board, that oversees that money, and then someone has to be in charge of utilizing it. So Start Garden has the contract to run the Smart Zone in Grand Rapids, and like I said, they're all over the state. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's just it's a really it's important for entrepreneurs to understand that if they're trying to start something up, you know, that there's some really specific and really awesome resources out there, and that's just you know, one of them. So I'm because we're just over halfway through here, I would like to go around the room, and I'd like to have everyone either talk about an element of how their organization has pivoted through because of the pandemic, and or if there are, because everyone in this room here, we are arm's length from entrepreneurs, leaders, women leaders, and I would like to hear about maybe specific examples of innovation that has come out of these times that we're in, or new businesses, good fundraise, talk about some success stories. And then we can wrap this up with maybe some challenges or what we need in our individual areas or organizations.
Well, I'll jump on that grenade. Inforum was midstream with some of our in-person leadership programs. We do between 200 and 300 in-person events a year, both in Detroit and Grand Rapids. And we turned all of that into virtual overnight, literally the next week. And I have to tell you that we are growing fast. And I think what I was sharing with Corey earlier, it's all been organic. The barrier to participation has just evaporated, right? It's so much easier for people to participate virtually than in person. It may not be the same quality for some things. In some things, it's better quality. Think about the last big dinner party you were at. You might have talked to the people near you on either side of you. In a Zoom meeting, you kind of get a sense of everybody, right? More or less. So what we had the good fortune to have happen was some of those global companies that we work with were pleased with the quality of the virtual content that we were producing and making available. And they pushed it out through their networks in North America. So we now have members from Canada, Mexico, across the United States. And it's been astonishing. We've also heard from industries like manufacturing as one example where in-person participation was often very challenging because people had less control over their, ability to get out and get to something. And so we're getting all kinds of excitement about this. And then when you start looking at the generational difference, I'm an old-fashioned fuddy-duddy boomer. The digital natives are eating this up, right? And so so now that we had that happen organically, now we're putting a strategy around it. I have seen that happen with more than one company with whom we've worked. When after, you got over that whole process of just being stunned at how quickly everything, if there was a way, and I don't want to lose sight of the tragedy and the pain and the difficulty, because there are many businesses who do not have an opportunity in the same way at all to do this. And Emily, you've probably been seeing the impacts of that through your research.
Yeah.
But I've also seen entrepreneurs shift to identify products and services that are going to have legs in this new environment. And they have pivoted very quickly to move in those directions.
I know that Laurie's got to leave pretty soon, and she's got some really great examples of how her particular organization pivoted. Would you mind sharing some of those, Laurie?
I mean, I would echo Terry and probably everybody here that we very quickly realized how to do virtual, basically everything. So we're doing a lot of programming. And again, the reach, it's really amazing. We do it live, but then people can go back and look at it later. So all the stuff that we're streaming, is getting so many people, so many views, more than you would have if you actually had that live event. So that's been amazing. But I think the one thing I'll talk about, so we have time for everybody else, is we have the Start Garden 100, which is a program we started 2 years ago with the idea that entrepreneurs pitched a 100-second video. We would select out of all those videos 100 people. They each got $1,000. We had a couple of months for them to work with that money to prepare for a demo day. And at the demo day, which was open to the public, we had thousands of people show up at this wonderful, great event. And at the end of the day, we had judges select 10 out of those 100 entrepreneurs, and each of them received another $20,000. That was a grant for them to keep going with their business idea. And then we as Start Garden would kind of wrap around them and walk them into the next phase of getting ready to launch. So we were going into our year 3 when COVID hit, and we quickly realized that it didn't make any sense to continue with the program in that capacity, because it seemed really frivolous for us to be looking at and asking people in this point in time to be brainstorming new ideas when the current entrepreneurs that we were working with were suffering and scared that they were losing their businesses, and then their personal lives were upheaved. So we took the fund, which was a $300,000 fund, and in the matter of like a week, we decided to ask the entrepreneurs to tell us what they needed to get through the next couple of months to stay whole personally. And we really focused more on them as people. What do they need to keep their families safe and healthy and fed and everything else? And we used the platform, and we ended up giving 68 entrepreneurs that $300,000. So each one of them received $5,000 in grant money to keep going. So, and we had 400 in 100 hours. We gave everybody 100 hours to submit their videos, and we had 475 videos, and we selected, like I said, 68, and the request for the money was well over $5 million in what the requests actually came out to be. So we're hoping actually we might be able to do a second round at some point this year, and then go back to the regular program next year. But yeah, that's what we did. So
that was really impressive, especially the speed with which you all changed up and then got the money out. That was really wild. So Amanda, you would probably you said you had some examples, right?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we, again, also had to shift events, which events and programming is so key for the startup community. It's where people bump into each other, especially when they're earlier stage. It's where they get to practice their pitch. I think everyone here has talked about, one event or the other that they do. Emily has done big pitch events here in Detroit so those are like the anchor, events that everybody goes to every year. So at first that was a little depressing, but we shifted pretty quickly to a virtual event series that we called Coping with COVID. And we were able to get Brad Feld and Arlen Hamilton and Steve Blank and all of these great national speakers that were in our network, but we were not utilizing. And so we're going to do virtual events for the rest of the year. And we're going to use this time to start, even though we're committed here to push our region forward, we have connections all across the country. And those connections are really important to bring back to Detroit entrepreneurs, and especially women and people of color who can't get in front of VCs who don't look like them. And so it's really inspired us to look at broader ways to leverage virtual programming and tools to really build our network beyond a physical space. And we're reopening next week, so that'll be fine. Slowly welcoming our members back in, which we're very pumped about that. Our members are all different kinds.
Those little things you have around the desks. And
our dividers.
I was like, whoa, getting all the things. COVID technology.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about it with Emily Moore on her Facebook page tomorrow, right?
Yay!
If anyone wants to find out or talk more about reopening office space. But it was interesting to see a lot of our members are doing fine. A lot of the startups hibernated or were still fundraising, but were able to get some critical funding, like what Laurie was just talking about, or from Invest Detroit. And so that was good to see. Like, that stuff is hugely impactful. It gave a sign of hope to people. But a lot of them tested new models of delivery. We had a printer company that no one's at the office, they're canceling their printing contracts or not printing paper. They instead rented out and came to people's houses, dropping off printers for people working at home. And video service companies dropping off. So it got people getting creative and testing new things. And I think as entrepreneurs and startups, we're always doing that. And we'll have to hopefully take one or two of those new lessons we learn and take them with us in the next 6 months or next year. But those are a couple of the different new business models we were seeing pop up.
Cool. I'm wondering if Anne might have anything to say about, like, the companies with which the organization works with, the pace of hiring. When we talk about, I've been in a lot of conversations with people, and some of them are like, yeah, now's a really great time to hire because you can hire the best people. They're all looking for jobs. Maybe Anne, do you have any insight from your network of companies you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has been a very interesting time, to say the very least. With my council, West Michigan Tech Talent, we have such a nice cross section of industry from West Michigan. So we have, pure tech companies, small business, but then we also have larger organizations that maybe just have a robust tech department. So it has been very interesting to see, some of those council organizations are struggling. They've had to furlough or implement work share programs so they can maintain, a portion of their workforce, where other organizations on the council are like, yep, we're hiring. We've moved our whole hiring onboarding process virtual and have had a lot of success. Even West Michigan Works as an organization, we've moved all of our hiring and onboarding virtually. And in the month of April, we were able to bring on 10 new hires and onboard them, bring them in, and start training them virtually. So it has been incredible to see the pivot, and of how we usually do things. And I think I would echo Terry, or at least mention when Inforum had to pivot quick, move everything to a virtual setting for all their meetings. I was in on some of those initial meetings, and I felt like you guys did an incredible job. I mean, it was seamless. But yeah, so, and then being workforce development, we've had to pivot how we connect with individuals who are looking for work and looking for resources. And so we've implemented one of the first virtual job fairs. So those companies that are in dire need of talent right now, we are trying to find ways to still provide opportunities to connect with employers, whether large or small. And that's been really interesting as well, to see the employers we work with really embrace this virtual sort of world that we're in now. Something else that was interesting to me is just the conversations that have been started now, in this new norm, as everyone keeps saying, we're starting to, as a council, we've always tried to do everything through that lens of diversity, equity, inclusion. But I feel like COVID really became like a catalyst for, okay, we've talked about it. Now let's try to put some effort and some resources behind how can we create more access? How can we reach, individuals who may not know about careers in technology, specifically for my council, and just really pushing that work forward, in a way that we hadn't before. I think we took for granted that we could just meet in person and talk, but now our reach, I think, Corey, you and I were talking about it earlier last week of, with these virtual tools that we can use now, our reach is almost limitless in terms of who we can reach, who we can inspire. A lot of the work I do is with students in schools, and it's like now we have better access to like creating that entrepreneurial spirit in students who we may not have otherwise been able to connect with. So as interesting and as hard as some of these times have been, there are definitely some there's a lot of silver lining there in terms of our reach and, you know, just extending our reach and our impact on our communities.
With the last few minutes that we have left, I'm going to throw another grenade, as Terry calls my questions. You know, when I wrote the description of the event, and I then followed up with all of you, you know, there is one big question, and it's a question that Startup Grind globally is asking among a lot of different populations, but with the lens of you know, women, is the rebuilding from this mass loss of employment roles, is this the best opportunity in generations for like gender equity?
Well,
Terry, you got something to say? I'm purposely going to take a moment.
So we all know the data that show that women were disproportionately hit by this round compared to '08, where men were disproportionately hit. However, I believe that any disruption which reduces the barriers to entry, you know, has an ability to level the playing field, so that talent, pure talent, regardless of whether it's black or white or male or female, pure talent will have an opportunity to rise. So I am hopeful that, because I believe that there's plenty of talent on both sides of the gender, on all sides, I should say, of the gender divides. And so I see opportunity.
I agree with you, Terry. I mean, we definitely in the last few months, we're seeing more and more female entrepreneurs that are applying to pitch to our organization. It's not something we've sought out, but I do see a lot of women that
in the shower next.
maybe sat
Wet your hair
on
up.
an idea and were and now they're, you know, deciding to put them out there and take some chances. And part of that's based on the fact that there's a lot of funding available, grants and loans, and through the government or through private equity. So I think that's bringing forth a lot of new ideas too. So I agree. I think it is, you know, I read a book recently, and the biggest thing that came out of that was the idea of you need to run the experiment. You need to, Richard Sheridan, he said, you know what, just take a shot at it and run with it and see what it brings up and see what happens.
You know,
I was thinking, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about when it comes to what we're seeing with office trends and flexibility of working from home. In some cases, I think that creates a better opportunity to support women because you now have more flexibility with your home life too, but only if you have a safe space at home, which I think very much depends on other people's personal and socioeconomic statuses. And then secondly, I really love what Anne said about, I feel like there is this urgency for equity, and you can't, despite COVID, like we are all connected through an infectious disease and we are all getting hit some harder, but we are all connected. And then with the protests going on for as long as they did, and being like, it did make everybody see and talk about it and realize like we can't hopefully move forward without taking more urgency in some of these steps. As we come out, I think we'll see what real change lasts. But it's really got me thinking that even though we operate in certain ways, we can always operate better.
I was just going to say too that, you know, at this time, you know, when everything had to stop, I mean, literally the whole world stopped, and it made people just stop and reflect. I think you start to realize that maybe I should take a risk now, you know, maybe it's time to take that risk. Maybe it's time to take some things into my own hands. And so somebody who, and maybe a woman who has been thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or starting something new, this might be the catalyst for the time to start really thinking about that. And because resources for small business were pouring out of the woodwork. You know, I mean, it's the first time that you've really heard a lot of organizations, they've gotten so much attention that maybe it just allowed people to realize, you know what, there is actually a lot of support out there. I mean, I think there were pros and cons because there was a lot of support and yet a lot of people didn't get some of that support, but I think it made it more visible. So.
Yeah, I would totally agree with everything you said, Laurie. You know, as being, you know, West Michigan Works being the fiduciary for a couple of grants, you know, especially for businesses, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've reached out to these companies that I'm working with and to, you know, how are things going? How are you doing with this transition? And they're like, we had no idea. We had no idea that these resources were available. So it really lifted the veil and sort of demystified, you know, some of those resources that are out there that are available.
I should have gone first because you guys are all way more like positive than I a little bit feel. I do.
Oh no, Emily, I could be right there with just flip the coin, and
I was like, get ready. I do feel like what Laurie is saying definitely proves out in the data where, like, you know, after we saw 2008, which I think is a different kind of start to a recession than what we're having right now. You know, it still remains to be seen how bad the recession will end up being, but I think like you do see a lot of people that got laid off then being like, why not? I should just start a business, or they try to apply for jobs for a couple of months, find that they're not getting one, or they're getting job offers that are paying just like something that isn't good for them. And so like then you do see like an uptick in businesses. And I think last time on the tech side, because it hit the auto industry so hard, there was a big push to diversify the economy. And so there was a lot of money put into like venture capital and into tech companies. And so when we saw people kind of say, oh, I'm going to start a tech company, then we saw a big uptick over the next 10 years, like really over since then until about a couple of years ago, it was just like all uphill. And so I think like that can be true, where when you have a recession, people will be more likely to start a business during that time. I think that the funding won't necessarily be the same as it was in 2009, 10, 11, because diversifying the economy isn't something that people are like, oh yeah, the solution to this is diversify the economy. But I also think that just how Terry was saying, how it's disproportionately affected women this time. It's one thing if it's disproportionately affecting men, because I feel like they're starting at a 10 and then they get knocked down to a 6. Like if we're starting at a 6 and you get knocked down, or you're starting at a 8.8 or whatever the stat is, and you get knocked down, that's a little bit harder to come back from. And I think a lot of people, because it's hitting everybody, a lot of people are having internal conversations at their houses of like which spouse is going to stay at home with the kids, because a lot of the schools are not reopening in the fall, or they're doing a half virtual, half virtual, half in person, to reduce the number of children that are at the school at the same time. And so a lot of people are like, oh, well, now I have to do something. It's not just for the summer, it's for the next year, where I'm going to have to worry about how to juggle kids and stuff. And then you have to have the conversation of like, okay, which one of our jobs is not going to work for us right now? And a lot of time, like women have lesser pay, lesser titles, lesser viewed importance in their jobs. And so that tends to be the one that will be staying at home. And so I think that is going to be a lot harder to bounce back from. And because it's happening, because it's hitting everybody, I feel like it's going to be a lot harder for any one population to bounce back, especially if they've been, you know, kind of like have these things stacked against them to begin with. So I'm a little bit.
No, those are all great points. So I just wanted to share sort of my closing shot is one of my favorite quotes. It's an old one. The difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping from the old ones. And so I think the opportunity that we have right now is a do-over in some ways, right? We have an opportunity to escape the old ideas. And I think it's going to depend on how well we do at that. I don't know. Everybody, all the way around, right? You know, oh well.
Yeah. I know. I like how I was like, I should have gone first because everyone's like, oh, that's great. Okay, well, time to go. Yeah. That'll be interesting.
No, I think you're spot on.
All of our 2021 reports, like when we release 2021 reports, they're on the calendar year 2020. I'm just like, next year. Like if the COVID reports that we're doing for any indication, it's just gonna be like, oh my goodness.
As they say, it's always hard to predict the future.
True.
Well, Terry got us started on the final thoughts. Any other final thoughts from the panel?
Well, I would just invite anybody that does have a business idea that they want to pitch. Where can you put Traverse City on the map? TC New Tech is we're going to put Traverse City on the map as far as a technology hub and a place for startups that can produce family living wages, a wage. We've been so tourism based here, and so any kind of ideas that are going to help provide jobs in Traverse City, our investors are always interested to hear. In Traverse City and beyond, because we have investors that are still investing in startups outside of the area.
Yeah, definitely. Traverse City is like so like sneaky. You guys got sneaky money and like sneaky startups there. Like anytime it's like people are like, oh, they've got a, and I'm like, yeah, they're definitely up there. Like,
we like to say unexpected, not sneaky.
Yeah, unexpected. That is unexpected. I'm a researcher, not a linguist.
But I know what you mean, Emily. Yeah. I gotcha. Yeah, so everybody come to Traverse City virtually for now, but eventually we'll welcome you all back.
Down there in the lower half of Michigan. Yeah, Amanda and I are like not invited anywhere near Traverse City for like a really long. They're like, oh, are you from Southeast? Okay, you can stay in Southeast Michigan and just never leave there for like 2 years.
We'd love to see you online. Can't wait.
Thank you, everybody, for letting us participate. I think Bamboo will be reopening next week. So if anyone is interested in visiting, we've done a lot to change the design. And we'll have virtual offices and be doing virtual events. So we hope to connect that way, too.
That's great, Amanda. Way to go.
Yeah, that would be great. If anyone wants to see some research, you can go to Entry Point's website. So, yeah,
I will definitely do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Corey.
Yes.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm again really grateful for the generosity of your time, everyone. Appreciate you joining us. This event is recorded and it can be found on our Startup Grind chapter page. I'll be posting all the links to LinkedIn, and I'll be sharing the direct links with all of you ladies. So thank you so much. And if we can get one last virtual round of applause. Really appreciate all the participation and all the great conversations. So
let's keep the conversations going.
Absolutely.
Yep. I'll let you have the rest of your night back. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Thanks, Corey. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Every year, Startup Grind hosts our SG Women Leaders Month, proudly recognizing the accomplishments of successful women leaders all over the world. These women are founders, venture capitalists, engineers, executives, educators, and more who represent our community all around the world. This month's SG Women Month is proudly presented by Google for Startups and Silicon Valley Bank.